everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I didn't get to go over this yesterday as it happened. I thought about streaming it live, but I was kind of busy, and I'm kind of glad I didn't because there were some more retrospective moments out in the Rose Garden later on that the media hyped up. But again, the media doesn't do their job. They're full of Johnny nonsense, and they're focusing on the sensational aspects of this social media summit, while there is a lot more to discuss, like the fact this wasn't a summit. This was a speech by Trump talking about how great the economy was, praising Lynn Cheney and his, I couldn't believe it, his pardon of Scooter Libby, the henchman for Cheney, and what a great guy he was. I mean, surreal moments here, folks. And then declaring how great it was that he said the Golan Heights region was Israel, with a bunch of, I don't know, I guess you'd have to call them all Trump supporters, maybe minus Tim Pool, clapping away as he talked about none of the policy. He barely mentioned Google, Twitter, Facebook, and others. And really, the press is just talking about Sebastian Gorka and this other, establishment piece of shit journalist to debate the whole thing and go over the ins and outs of what I want to call the social media shit show, not the social media summit, is MediaRoots.org's Robbie Martin. Robbie, how are you?
I'm doing good, Jason. Thanks for having me on again.
So, all right. Now, this thing flew under the radar for me, especially with the Epstein arrest that I've been covering heavily since last Saturday. But I began to see some of these people starting to discuss this quote-unquote social media summit, right? And I had no idea until after the summit was over that, Mark Dice, who I've known for years and is in my film Invisible Empire, and I respect a lot of his previous work. Obviously, we probably don't see eye to eye politically these days, but as a person, I like him. He's there. Tim Pool, who has been friends with Luke forever. I just did a 2-year-plus stint with We Are Change, and he's become a social media superstar, a Paul Bunyan character, if you will, after his Joe Rogan Experience podcast with Jack Dorsey of Twitter, right? But then all these other people that I kind of see on the fringes are there as well. Bill Mitchell, a big Q pusher. I noticed him. That Carpe Dunctum, the guy who does all the funny memes. And hey, that last meme where Ozzy Osbourne introduces Trump while there's technical difficulties of the Dem debate's funny. You know what I mean? But are these people getting to the root issues of, what's really going on in our deep political system? Or was this just like a campaign for the cheerleaders of Trump?
Well, obviously it was a campaign for the cheerleaders of Trump. I mean, he didn't invite, if the goal of this summit was to sort of point out social media bias or censorship, he literally only brought people on who are right-wing alt media people, with and the fact that Tim Pool is the only person there who is not overtly right-wing is interesting because, I would argue his audience is predominantly right-leaning, even though he espouses, he claims he's a classical liberal or whatever. But one thing about that I found interesting about his appearance with Jack Dorsey on Joe Rogan is I don't think a CEO of a major company would have agreed to do that. If you want to call that Joe Rogan's social media summit, I just find it very interesting that Jack Dorsey was willing to sit down with someone like Tim Pool, because, I don't believe that he would have just sat down with anyone that Joe Rogan chose, without sort of approving that beforehand.
Well, I'd say this. I'd say Tim did have such a big presence there, and Vice being the hip spot. This is how I looked at it. Number one, Dorsey himself probably watched some of Tim's stuff back in the day on Vice. If we're, these people feed into their own bullshit so many times. And even I thought Vice has, in the past, I thought their North Korea documentary was pretty interesting, even though there was a slant there. I like to see raw camera footage, et cetera, all points. They were doing some good work in India, and et cetera. I liked Tim Pool's piece with Kim.com. Before the raid. And I think, maybe Dorsey came across something like that, saw his presence on Twitter. They brought in the PR department. That woman was there to answer basically anything that was tough or legalese. I believe she was in the in the legal department at the time. So that's how I think that came about. I think he also listens to Rogan, and he saw it as a big PR move. There was probably some chatter with some of the upper echelons of that organization, but at the end of the day, it does kind of launch him into superstardom, right? And he's not a QAnon pusher. You can't. I mean, listen, I think Poole's a smart guy. I think he's very good at debate. But just like any of these guys, if you bring up the right point, you can always have much more of a discussion if you don't just take them out. It's very easy to take on somebody who has a very narrow political perspective and is loose with the facts, if you will, Robbie.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know we probably differ on Tim Pool, but the point I was trying to make before was that I believe that this is all PR. So when I was saying that earlier, I believe that Jack went on Joe Rogan for PR reasons, and I believe on some level that these social media companies probably are eager to make this the primary issue with them. If the primary issue with Silicon Valley becomes this idea that they are biased against conservatives and takes the focus away from all the other horrible things they do, such as the mass surveillance and privacy violations that they're doing on a daily basis, such as the censorship of any controversial content that threatens the ruling class in this country, I believe that the social media companies would rather the focus be on this more micro issue of, bias against conservatives, because what it allows them to do is, all they would have to do is kind of implement sort of a fairness doctrine policy to sort of, equally censor both sides or what have you. And that's obviously not the solution, to what the problem is now. And even Trump himself at this social media summit, if you want to even call it that, it was a shit show, as you said earlier. But even he was sort of pretending that he said something at the very end of it, after inviting all these people who are predominantly right-wing alt media people and meme makers. He says, this isn't just for our side. This is for both sides. And I don't know if all you people in the audience are supporters of me. You could be the most liberal people ever. He said something like that. So I think he had a realization that he maybe messed up or didn't talk about this broadly enough, because on some level, maybe Trump even knows that, that is sort of a broadly appealing thing to spread to people, that these social media companies are censoring everybody on some level, and that they are stifling any controversial content, that sort of steps outside of the status quo. And it was interesting to hear Trump have like sort of a moment of realization, perhaps, that should be the real issue. But he's ruined it, just as all these other people have ruined it by making it all about this bias against conservatives. And there is some truth to the idea that, like, why was Alex Jones, singled out and censored off social media? So there is something going on there, but I think that it is ultimately a distraction from the real problem here. It is coming for us all, left or right. It doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you fall on. If you step outside of the status quo and say something threatening enough to the ruling class, you will be censored now on the internet. And I think that's going to be part of the course moving forward.
Well, listen, that's the whole thing. This is a large swath of people, right? And when you do buckle it down into that bullshit left and right paradigm, excuse my French, I know some people have been very angry with me with my language, but I'm sorry, I'm a loose cannon. And by the way, guys, my demo, my demographics, I literally have 0% watchers under 24. Okay, I don't. It's a 0, 18 to 24, and 0%. It might be 0.01%. So if I offend you, I apologize. I get emotional about these things. I don't want to put on a fake persona. And all of this bullshit, if you will, that I'm constantly seeing. This stepped us back into the Stone Ages, and let me tell you why. I want to play this little clip like right here. This was supposed to be, again, about possible antitrust. You could have raised the point that Vox Media, which is in bed financially with the Google News Initiative, a.k.a. YouTube, and they promote content, ran a campaign against another independent creator, Crowder. That's a legitimate argument. We should be talking about that. Instead, what were you doing? You were talking about how Dick Cheney's wife is coming up in politics and how awesome she is. Surreal moment, number one. And then pardoning his number one goon, Scooter Libby, who I promise you guys not a good person, involved in some really devious things. If you want to talk about wars of aggression or regime change wars, all right, guys, they don't happen without the help and the legwork of Scooter Libby constantly on a day-to-day basis. So, and he only got really pegged on the Enron financial scandal. All right? There was a lot more that guy did, I promise you. So let's just play this little clip. This is one of the surreal moments. I'm going to read to you the Golan Heights moment, but at really no point did he talk about anything except for, obviously, I'm shadow banned. I was getting, 700,000 followers a day, and then it was 600,000 followers a day, and I'm sure you've experienced too. Well, boo frickin' who? The algorithm's way more against me, guys. I hate to tell you. I mean, admitted, every single one of my videos goes up for review. If the algorithm doesn't catch it, someone reports it. It's not 50% anymore. It's not 60. It's not 75. It's 100% of the time. Every one of my videos goes up for review. So anyway, let's get to him praising Darth Cheney's wife and his henchmen.
She won by 12, and she wouldn't stop. They just every day. Where is she? She's here. She's there. Fantastic job you did. We're proud of you. Well, thank you, honey. That's great. It was just honestly working with people that know what they're doing. It's fun. That was fun, and you know what you're doing. Representative Dan Crenshaw, who is very good at this,
Crenshaw
by
between,
the way, Dan. Very good at this. Really good. Thank you. It's great to have you in the party. And you have more courage than I do, Dan. Okay? That courage of yours is incredible. Thank you very much. Great job. A friend of mine and a wonderful person and somebody that has, I don't know, pretty unlimited future, I'd say. I hear a lot of very positive things. Liz Cheney. Liz, thank you.
Oh, it's Liz. I'm sorry. Is that the daughter? Is that not Lynn? Is that Liz, or did you just get the name wrong?
Liz, that's the daughter who's currently, I believe she's a congresswoman or a senator.
Okay, so see, I got it wrong, guys. See, I get things wrong. I'm going to apologize. Liz Cheney, the daughter of Darth Cheney.
Scooter Libby is a man that got treated very unfairly, and Liz was right in the forefront of that one. And I said, what do you think, Liz? And you said, absolutely, he deserves it. And it's been a very popular pardon. He was treated very, very brutally and unfairly.
It's a popular pardon? In what frickin' universe who was in the streets for Scooter Libby? Let's talk to Robbie Martin right now. Do you remember people in the street? Free Libby now? No, people were hoping, and hucksters, by the way, guys. Hucksters back in 2004, a man named Tom Flacco, he ran something like this. He said, don't worry, there are sealed indictments, and people are starting to get arrested. And Scooter Libby's just the first one. And all this has to do with 9/11. So don't worry. Stop doing your work. Stop protesting. It's all over. The universe is going to be saved. And that didn't happen, did it? It's called the imagination land of indictments. And it's not a new phenomenon in 2016 and 17, guys. We could talk about Nassara, but especially look up Tom Flacco and check out what he did with the Scooter Libby indictment and how people started to believe that Cheney was already indicted and the good people and the white hats in the government were going to save us. No one's saving you but you. And that's why we're talking about this stuff, because they're making it into a left-right issue. And it ain't left or right. It's right and wrong. And how many of those people in that audience spoke out against when he struck Syria? How many people are talking about that leaked OPCW report? It's zero. It's zero, Robbie. So where do we go from here? I mean, do we see where these, where this summit and now the investigations go? Is this going to be real, or is Jason Burmis and Robbie Martin going to be continued to be rendered as hate speech?
I think what we're seeing, Jason, is a political form of rope-a-dope. I think that it's not just a partisan imbalance, to say the least, that he's presenting at this summit. These are people, for the most part, that are in this audience that he's invited that have benefited immensely themselves from social media and the algorithms on social media. And so for these people now to be basically saying that they're being censored, that it's social media is biased against them, is a little bit rich just for that reason by itself, that they really wouldn't be where they are without social media. But on top of that, these people are being invited to the White House. I mean, they are within the confines of presidential power. So the people who are going to lose out here, Jason, are people like you and me who aren't invited to the White House, who don't have the luxury of being funded by any right-wing billionaires like Robert Mercer. I mean, we already know James O'Keefe. He is not an independent journalist. Actually, Trump was funding him. What is his Project Veritas?
Mm-hmm.
He was taking thousands of dollars from Donald Trump,
and has a link to what's his name, Eric Prince as well. Listen,
exactly. So these people are all being supported and lifted up by the same sort of groups of people or the same power factions that surround Trump. So really, it's not, we shouldn't worry about these people. They're going to be fine. They're severely funded. They're already very, very popular online, or else they wouldn't have been invited here in the first place. It's all these people that don't have the funding, that don't have the boosting of these algorithms, that are going to lose out, that are, frankly, going to slip through the cracks because they won't be reported on in the media when they get censored. They won't be invited to the White House. So I think that that's the real problem here, is that the people who are grabbing all the attention from this are the people who are really in a real way going to be the least affected by it, because what we see here is they're getting incredible publicity for it. So that's kind of what I mean by rope-a-dope, is this is their sort of their counterpunch move. They're going to be, they're actually going to get a lot of publicity out of this idea that they're being censored, quote unquote. So I think that we all the little people doing alt media and indie media right now have to be seriously concerned, and also should not feed into this sort of limited hangout, narrow framework of what this censorship is about. We should be talking about the real broader problems with social media. I mean, there's so many, not just what I was talking about earlier, privacy violations, mass surveillance, but they also, Google, for example, has been working hand in glove with the U.S. State Department since like the early, mid 2000s.
And NASA, and now the Google News Initiative. We can go on and on. It's a government entity.
They want to do geopolitics. They want to plug into that sphere of power, and they already have. And Google, for example, is probably more powerful than a lot of nation states in the globe. I mean, if not even more powerful than maybe the NSA and what data they have. So we really need to start looking at this in a more broad way. I mean, so I know that I keep repeating myself there, but.
No, absolutely. And you know what? I want to back up just a minute, because as much as I don't like O'Keefe's connections and I don't like his partisan politics, I'm glad his investigations are there. You really have to put something in someone's face to see that, yes, we are building these algorithms. Yes, we are downranking people. Now, again, the people that they like to talk about are the Crowders of the world, the Rubins of the world, but we all know they're not the only targets. And that once we get the source documents, we're going to see some more interesting things. And I just like to say this. I always say, look, you got to look at people's work, and you got to take what you can, and you got to push away the stuff that you don't like. And you have to be honest about that. You have to bring up the fact that, like you said, mercenaries like Eric Prince aren't great people. Even when Trump was talking about getting out of the Middle East, for instance, PMGs were the ones that were going to go in there. So now with all these people, like you said, getting propped up, gaining credibility, what is the next move? Are we going to have hearings? Is there going to be any antitrust against these people? Or is it really just going to be more of the same? Or, I'm even going to throw another one to you, Robbie. Does this election matter? So in other words, if we get somebody other than Trump in the White House, will we see a different result than what we would if Trump stays in 2020?
As far as the Silicon Valley issue, is that what you're specifically asking about?
Yes. Well, I'm talking about basically the antitrust, the censorship online, these algorithms that are inherently unfair. We want to talk about private companies. That's fine. You know what I mean? I have no problem with a private company that has its own policy. But just like you stated, they've been in bed with the State Department and the NSA for how many years now? And like I said, with them also being in bed with NASA, and they're not paying taxes, and they work with it's not just space programs with NASA, it's quantum computing programs with NASA and IBM. And I mean, they're not private companies. They're media, military, industrial complex, really biotech companies at this point, because they have their hand in everything, including the biology data of everybody around. For instance, I don't know if you saw the news today. We did a story yesterday on the thousands of apps on Androids that were still spying on you. I warned people about this forever. But today, they're saying, oh yeah, by the way, you use Google Assistant, we're totally recording your conversations. And we've got thousands of those that have now been exposed too. So my point being is this. If Trump stays in office, do we see any kind of real change in that antitrust market? And if so, or if not, do you think there's a possibility of a different outcome if someone else gets in there from the other side?
So with Trump being in office and dealing with this issue, no, I don't see any progress in actual seriously dealing with the issue, because he has turned it into, and so has his base, into a partisan issue. So if that's how he's going to continue moving forward on it, it's definitely going to completely miss, what really needs to be done here. As far as someone else getting in that can change this, I don't have very much hope that any of the Democrats running will seriously tackle the issue of even just regulation on Silicon Valley. So I would say maybe the best hope in terms of that, like if we're going to do a top-down government sort of enforced regulation, or trying to break up these companies in any way, I would say Bernie might be the best person who could do that. But I don't really have much faith that he will follow through on sort of this, this anti-corporate populism rhetoric that he pushes. Even though some of it sounds very good to me in a lot of ways, we already know what Obama did. I mean, just look at what the Obama administration did with Silicon Valley. They really are largely to blame for letting all this shit happen. I mean, the Bush administration takes some blame too. I mean, Google's been around, since the 90s, I think. But the Obama administration is where a lot of this stuff was sort of quietly built up to such extreme levels that it got so powerful that, the idea of seriously regulating it at this point is controversial. But it should have been done during, at the very least during the Obama administration. And so that's what the neoliberal policy did, was basically make these companies so powerful that they, they're giant behemoths now that can barely be stopped. So it depends on if Bernie, if he gets in, which seems very unlikely, but if he does, if he veers away from sort of the neoliberal direction that he's sort of been going towards since he's become more famous. Because I believe that the last election, he was actually perhaps a little more radical. And he wasn't as, influenced by sort of the neoliberal consensus. I mean, he wouldn't have said anything about how evil Russia and Putin was, I don't think, 2 years ago. And now sounds like a Russiagator. So
all of them. It sounded horrible, Robbie. I mean, I hope that we get to do a post show on the next Democratic. I think it's in Detroit, but put it on your calendar, because I really love to have you live stream right after, and we can go after our notes. But I mean, those things were embarrassing, man. They were when Kristen Gillibrand is the best you got in the second debate, because she's the only one that brings up Iran. There's no war questions whatsoever in the second debate, and Pete Bootlicker comes off as the best guy with his establishment talking points. Well, everybody raises their hand to just ludicrous policy, while they don't talk about, again, the wars in the Middle East, Venezuela, etc. They pander to nonsense identity politics issues, and it doesn't give me any hope. I mean, again, we've been talking about this fake left-right paradigm for a while, and Bernie, listen, his campaign at least had the ode of a genuine one to me, until he crumbled under the pressure to not say anything about Hillary Clinton robbing him. That was it for me. I defend, and I'll still defend when he says the right thing. When he's against the war in Yemen, when he wants to end those things, when, he says it might not be Medicare for all, but we obviously need a better system. We need a better medical system, 100%. But to crumble to the Clinton dynasty and the monster there, I'm sorry, I can't trust you at all. I can't. And Tulsi, we've at length talked about her problems, and we'll probably do so over the next debate. I want to shift gears to the after shit show. Okay, So Sebastian Gorka, who I know very little about, but I see like memes and stuff, but he's got an accent and apparently he's on Fox News. He starts getting into it with one of these reporters, and now this is like the big headline. So I'm just going to show a piece of it, and then I want to give my little breakdown of it. You're a punk! You're a punk! Now, Robbie, as I was talking to you, you've got everybody on you. You're being called out by these, mainstream monsters of propaganda, in my opinion. Why not just get to the point? Forget about messing around with "you're a punk." I mean, I'm sorry, I don't see many people that are too physically intimidating. I know I'll be 40 in a couple weeks, but I'm pretty sure if any of them tried to attack me, they're Secret Service anywhere. But if they did, let's say they even got 1 or 2 shots in, I don't even know how it could be concussion level. That guy's a soft dude. My side point, why not look at them and say, why are you promoting a guy like Joe Biden as the #1 presidential candidate when he met with one of the financiers of 9/11 from the Pakistani ISI, General Mahmoud Ahmed, and talked about it openly, and none of you will report on that. You still haven't. Almost 2 decades later, I would have brought up the weapons of mass destruction because he was talking about when you're when the pop singer gets into it, when you're a journalist, you have editors and da-da-da, and they all lie through their fucking teeth. Every single one of them told us nonsense about Afghanistan's involvement in 9/11. Guys, just so you know, the Taliban was in oil deals in the summer before 9/11, and it was said, hey, we're going to get this oil or not. It's either going to be with a carpet of gold and or a carpet of bombs. And guess which way we went? You can look up that quote. I forget who said it. It's a long time ago now. But that was a negotiation. Bin Laden himself, guess where he was kept? They found him in Pakistan, but there were reports literally the week after that on September 11th, he was in a Pakistani hospital being protected by the Pakistani military while he was undergoing dialysis. Okay? That's a real thing. Anybody can look it up. I believe it was CBS because Dan Rather was the reporter. I could pull it up right now. We could watch it. And no one talks about that. Why not call the fake news media out on the fake news? You have every opportunity. Instead, you're a punk. It'll get me new likes and I'll go viral. Well, you can go viral with real information that matters that doesn't go down partisan lines. And that frustrates the hell out of me, Robbie.
Well, I mean, you just nailed it right there. I mean, this is just a partisan, information war. I think for a lot of these people that were invited to that summit, they're not the types of people that dig deep and go back into the past and reveal the kind of information you're talking about. So, of course, Sebastian Gorka, and it should be made known to your audience that Sebastian Gorka is not some kind of anti-establishment, new right darling. He's actually a neocon who was part of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's neocon think tank with James Woolsey and Michael Ledeen that pushes Iranian regime change. So he's one of these interesting characters, actually, that kind of tried to bridge the gap between the neocon DC establishment, the Hawks, and sort of the new right kind of alt media circuit. And there's another guy actually there that's filming him who says he could kick your ass. So he's like filming on an iPhone while Gorka's, facing down this reporter. That guy is actually an employee, a former employee of the Frank Gaffney think tank, which is basically a think tank that is bread and butter is like Islamophobia. And Frank Gaffney actually is a PNAC signatory. He was part of the original group of neocons, who helped create the blueprints for the Iraq War. So it's very strange that these two people in particular have sort of inserted themselves into this Breitbart, adversarial against the left media circuit when they're really, they really are just hardcore neocons from the Bush era. But yeah, I mean, there's no there's no real meat being addressed here. And there's also, arguably, like, why wouldn't someone like Lee Stranahan, for example, be invited to the White House? I actually strongly disagree with him on a lot of issues. He's very right wing, but he actually does dig deep and does some pretty intelligent analysis about certain things. So it's interesting that Trump would only invite these sort of hyperbolic meme maker, viral sensations, but not actual right wing, media people who actually do serious work. So that, I think that also speaks to something, that this is not, this is just a show of some kind for Trump. Again, it's all about an information war. And I think that it's like going after the mainstream media for being fake news is such a nonsensical, vague, and ultimately it is a low-hanging fruit, not really serious way to address the multitude of lies and the continuous lies that they tell us.
Dude, listen, let me stop you again. So let's forget about Biden. They're still going with this Russia nonsense, that somehow Russia pushed the conspiracy theory of Seth Rich. And I would have said, oh, you're a journalist. Is Seymour Hersh a journalist? Is there anybody here that's going to tell me that Seymour Hersh, the guy that brought Gitmo to the public through Manning and WikiLeaks and those documents, you're going to tell me that Seymour Hersh is not a journalist? You would have heard crickets, right? And I would have been, how come nobody here is covering the leaked phone calls of Seymour Hersh regarding Seth Rich being in touch with WikiLeaks and having a Dropbox? Does it not exist? Is it fake news? Is it not a recording? You had every opportunity to throw independent media bomb shots at these mother truckers, and nobody did it, Robbie. And just to go back to what I was talking about, Bin Laden, hospital worker. I saw Osama. They did a huge video piece. It's been pulled from YouTube. I'm sure I've played it before. I think the raw footage, but January 28th, 2002, less than a year after the fact, CBS did that report that, yes, Bin Laden was being protected by Pakistani military after 9/11. You know who we never invaded after 9/11? Pakistan. You know what we never talk about in regards to 9/11 ever? Pakistan. But again, they go for that low-hanging fruit. Robbie, you have a documentary series out there called A Very Heavy Agenda. You do a ton with Media Roots and your sister, Abby Martin. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working on right now.
Well, I'm eventually going to put out part 4 of A Very Heavy Agenda. Don't have a release date for that yet. But right now I'm just working on doing live streams like you, Jason, off my own YouTube channel, which is also called The Very Heavy Agenda on YouTube, and Media Roots Radio with my sister Abby Martin about weekly. So we're doing it about once a week now. So you can definitely check that out.
Excellent. And just so everybody understands what Trump said, I have somebody in the comments section going, that's not what the summit was about. Guys, he barely mentioned social media. Let me read a quote for him about the Golan Heights. I gave representation in the strongest form of the Golan Heights, Israel. They've been looking at it for 52 years. Yeah, exactly. For 52 years, no other nation state has had the gall to say this is yours because it's not theirs, Trump. For 52 years, they couldn't get it. Trump said while describing how they'd been to many summits where people would fly in, talk about the Golan Heights, and then fly out. They fly in, they fly out, some beautiful planes. Some had beautiful planes, some didn't. And they probably didn't get there by plane. I mean, it was nonsense. It was a nonsense talk. That's why we did this video. Guys, if you like what I do, I put out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 videos a day. This is number 2. We're going to have a walk and talk soon. I'm going to be covering even more Epstein stuff later in the day. Any more breaking news on R. Kelly? Guys, I got to go fund me. We're already 4/5 of the way there. We got 5 days left. I want to thank everybody that's donated. We're making it happen. And I'm going to continue to pump out 30 to 50 videos on subjects that matter every single week with your help. So thank you very much. And I will see you guys all on the flip side.